The United States Navy has a motto, leadership by example. This is what inspired me to do the right thing, to justify a true cause. This was one of the few medals, if not the only medal, that was awarded to a Navy hero that had never been delivered to his next of kin. This was wrong to retain this medal. As I found out, the Navy loved to have it in a glass enclosed case. I felt that something had to be done. My first visit to Pearl Harbor was to view much of the damage. Seeing the overturned hulk of the USS Utah, never realizing until years later that hulk still contained remains of over 50 men. As I learned later, one of those men was Peter Tomich, who had been awarded the Medal of Honor by President Roosevelt in 1942. For what that man did in sacrificing himself was very unique, very unusual, but he sacrificed his life by going below while the ship was capsizing to save his men and to avoid the boilers from exploding. Typical of many Croatian Americans, he did his job effectively, and the fact that he achieved the highest rank as an enlisted man in the United States Navy is very, very impressive. His men were very important to him. He was a man's man. He would go ashore and he would enjoy a good drink with many of the men. One of the men told me that he missed the ship in California, and he picked it up later on, and he was docked some pay and admonished and disciplined for missing the ship. After the Incheon landing, we were ordered by the Navy to return to Yokohama, and we arrived there to supply them with the jet fuel in support of this campaign going north from the Chosin Reservoir. We had arrived through the minefields when we could see through the binoculars the Chinese and the North Korean communists were closing rapidly on the port of Hungnam with this threat of annihilation. Thousands were coming down to the port. But we were the last ship available to take out the last refugees. The Army came out and discussed the situation with our captain, Leonard P. LaRue, who was a fine man and a great leader. He neither looked to his left nor right. In a low and a moderate tone, he said, "I will go in and we will do everything we can to take off as many people as possible." A total, eventually, of 14,000 people. We loaded them like cargo in the hatches. We were not a passenger ship. In a sense, the ship was like on the front line of a battle. And it was very cold at this time. There was great concern by my captain, the very brave and heroic men, that perhaps being fired over our head, a short fall would have hit the ship with the jet fuel still on board. It would be a fiery explosion. Thence, when we got out to sea, it was a very arduous, difficult trip with all of these people. We arrived in Kojido on Christmas Day. The ship was a mass of humanity. He would never speak of bravery or heroism. It was his duty and function as a human being to do what was right and just and good. There's a quiet respect we who have served aboard ship have for each other, even regardless of nationality. One of the first trips that we took was the surrender and the occupation of the Northern Marianas. And the commanding officer there was Captain Satoshi Morimoto, commissioned officer of the Japanese Imperial Army. What I found was a man you were able to relate to as a human being as opposed to an enemy. When I was in Japan during the Korean War, I was able to visit Captain Satoshi Morimoto to renew an acquaintance with a former prisoner of war in his home and had a nice meal, a symbol of friendship with a former enemy. When the Navy was trying to locate the so-called next of kin, the letters were being returned. They undertook no effort to learn where his family was. I decided, well, if I'm going to Croatia, to look into this. So we proceeded from Medjugorje down to a monastery near Prologue, and there we met the abbot. He opened up all of the books and the records and the papers and the documents, and the dust was flying off these huge volumes. He said, there's no question, this is the man, and this is the identification. You have everything here. That's where he comes from, and that's his family. I offered all of the documentation to the Navy when they resisted and told me that it was not sufficient, that I would fly at my own expense to Zagreb and accompany an attaché or other representative from the State Department to the monastery and to the village. They said, oh no, there's no need to do that. They intended to do nothing. I brought a lawsuit against the government. The lower court decided against me. We took it to the Court of Appeals, and again, they affirmed the lower court, saying there's a discretion of the Secretary of the Navy. It cannot be disturbed. I think it was the year 2005 when I got a phone call from the Department of Defense saying that they wished to talk to me about the medal and the presentation of this medal to our next of kin. And I, in a sense, responded to the call from the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, that I wished not to be bothered anymore. I had exhausted all of my attempts, personal expense and lawsuit and travels and otherwise. I was interrupted by the caller who was calling from the Department of Defense and said, no, excuse me, Mr. Lunney, the caller said, he said, we have a direction from the Secretary of Navy to make this presentation. I said, well, on what basis? He said, on the basis of everything you have presented. And we are prepared to go forward and make the presentation of this Medal of Honor to the man whom you recommended, and that was the grandson of Ivan Tomich, and his name was Strechko Herzog Tomich, aboard the largest American aircraft carrier, the USS Enterprise. It will be anchored off Split, Croatia, and we will have the ceremony there with the Commander of Naval Forces Europe, Commander U.S. Naval Forces Europe, together with all the dignitaries from Croatia, and make the presentation of this medal to Strechko Tomich. And that was all accomplished on one of the most beautiful days you can imagine in the outer harbor of Split aboard this huge aircraft carrier. And thus we had mission accomplished. Medals or honors or citations are meant as examples to people more than a personal decoration, to enhance their wish, will, or desire to do good things. With Captain LaRue, he was able to make a decision without whether it was too dangerous, whether it was career enhancing, whether his ship would be put in too much jeopardy, whether the enemy was closing too rapidly. But leadership was expressed by him by making a decision unencumbered by any other thought process other than doing the right thing. I was never sat down nor taught leadership, but when you see people like Peter Tomich in doing what he did, he was a true leader, a true symbol of what we are all about. A man that was willing not only to fulfill his duty and function, but to sacrifice his life. And he stands as a true example of what many of us should always remember and persevere in remembering. This is what life is all about. And these symbols and these experiences and these stories should be told and retold, because there's so few examples, in my estimation, of true leadership and sacrifice as I have learned with Peter Tomich and with my captain, Captain Nenad P. LaRue. Peter Tomich, whom incidentally is still on watch.